Okay, and then the opposition team, Riam. All right, that said, same rules apply. You have 3 minutes of speech, the no reply speeches. First and last minute will be protected. POIs within that minute band. POI should not exceed 15 seconds. Kill 20 to 30 seconds before asking. I'll call you out for badgering. The feedback at the top of this round, an open round. All the best. First speaker, ready when you are. This is loud enough.
This house would allow students full access to gadgets, for example, mobile phone, laptops, among others. Now, in tonight's debate, we ask ourselves, who is a student in this case? For the particular round, we esteem affirmatives. We are going to take secondary students, and then students are all learners in student, for this case, will be all learners in secondary school. Now, the motion is saying full access to the gadgets like phone. Now, how are we going to make it full access to the gadget? Now, we are going to give full access, but then give restrictions. Then that means, even though they are going to be having it, possessing it during all times, then that means they will be monitored closely so that they should not go into challenges. What is the problem that we have found out alive? The government has shifted from a system of learning which is teachers-based to learners-based, where students are required to do several research to find out and give their findings and present to the student. But we have realized that in village schools and most schools in Uganda, they are not having enough gadgets. In addition to that, even though some schools are having enough gadgets, but it cannot be enough for students all time. Then that means students are given little time to do their research in the computer labs. This is which can make students to again cause another challenges, which is pornography, because they will be having short access, and then they are not monitored. Then misuse of social media platform, instead of researching, they will again be doing other things. Security of digital gadgets. Now, in tonight's debate, we are looking at how best learners can use the digital gadgets appropriately without affecting them. Now, we have to come up with a plan as the government body. We are going to design rules and regulations that students should follow, and then we are going to train administrators of the school, and then do regular supervision and how to detect what the students are using. Now, once we do this outside large, we esteem proposition, we realize that we are going to get these three things. Then that means students will be accountable and responsible for each and every mistake they will be making. They will be able to have access to research. They will be able to learn, have enhanced learning. Then the third one, they will be leaving them connected. Then that means someone can share with someone from another school. Therefore, giving proper connection of which it will promote in the education which has been developed by the government of Uganda, which is learners-based. Team Negative should realize that even though we are going to give them full access to the internet, we are going to restrict them. Restrict them in what way? We are going to develop. I'd like to rest my case.
All right, the House wants to thank the Speaker for that speech. We now call upon the first speaker in the opposition to advance the case on their side.
I start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Partner, our resolution for today is this House would allow students full access to gadgets. For example, mobile phone, laptop at all time in school. We as team negators, we say they should not accept children to use gadgets. But team affirmative, they don't know what they're talking about because they're saying they should what? They're going to supporting our side. They say that they should not what? They should not allow gadget. Yet they are supposed to say that they should what? Allow gadget. This house believes that unrestricted gadget access in school harm education, discipline, and students' well-being. We oppose the motion on the ground that full gadget access lead to disrupting, misuse, and long-term harm to learning and social development. Instead, we advocate for regulated, purpose-driven use to technology in school. Me as the first speaker, I will talk about mental health and social risk. The second speaker is going to come and talk about misuse and security concern. Me as the first speaker, I will talk about mental health and social risk. This simply means we should not accept what? Gadgets such as phone, because it's going to lead to what? Mental disabilities. For example, if you accept a child to use the phone, use the phone, it will lead. I think they should not accept a child to use a phone because their head will be focusing on phone. Instead, they should what? Focus on their reading. If they tell a child to use, for example, a calculator is also a digital what? Device. For example, smartphone is a digital device. So we think that school children, because if they tell them to their mind will not what? Be thinking. Instead, they should leave them to think on their what? Own. I beg to submit my case.
All right, we want to thank the speaker for that speech. We now call upon the second affirmative speaker to extend the debate on their side.
August Stouts are large. Listen very carefully. In this debate, we are looking at how best can learners use gadgets appropriately in secondary schools. But then, how do we bring out how best these learners can use gadgets in secondary schools? Our first speaker comes and tells you that these students have to use gadgets at secondary schools and they're going to own it at all times. But then, how are we going to make sure that how are we going to make sure that the problems that these people give us, the mental health, social risk, or misuse of these gadgets, how are we going to solve those problems? Our first speaker comes and tells that we're going to bring out restrictions, and as the Ministry of Education and Sports, we're going to develop platforms that can be able to monitor all websites that these learners will be able to access, or it will be restricting all websites and platforms these learners can use. If it is probably maybe a hacking website or a pornographic website, we think that Ministry of Education, we're going to design systems that can restrict these learners from accessing these contents. As Ministry of Education, we think that if we train these administrators, to properly monitor the use of phones in their schools, we think that learners are going to use gadgets appropriately. But then, how are school administrators going to help us in proper use of gadgets by these learners at school? We think that if it is time for lessons, there's going to be restriction of use of gadgets during lesson hours. If it is time for lunch, we think that there's going to be restrictions. If it's time for lunch, you're going to use it for lunch. But then these phones can only be used by you at any time at your free time, but not at stipulated time like lesson time and other engaging activities at school. These gadgets will not be used at this kind of particular time. But then, what are we going to benefit if learners are given full access to gadgets to use at their free time? We see that there's going to be a lot of research that is going to be done by the students who are currently pursuing the new lower secondary curriculum. I think that these learners are going to understand their subjects better. They're going to make thorough research other than just using what their teachers are packing them with. They're going to do thorough research and they'll understand the concept they teach them in class better. But then not only that, they'll also be able to connect with learners from other schools, and they'll be able to engage in productive activities, because remember, all the activities are being restricted by the websites that are going to be designed that will be able to monitor and give them access to only what is fit for their ages. But then what does this other side come and tell us? They come and tell us that we should not use gadgets, but then we see in this world it's going to be a very dormant world where learners don't research, where learners are going to be probably maybe packed in the computer lab and they not be able to properly or effectively do their research. They will not be able to understand the concepts that the teachers will be giving them in class. Then also we also notice that even if you tell us that use of gadgets is going to disrupt learners, we say that these gadgets are going to only be used during free times of these students. They're going to have their phones even transnight, so long as it's free time and it's not time for doing any particular activity. We think that disrupting learners will not be a case in our particular case. But then what Team Negative failed to show us, they failed to show us how best we can solve the problem in status quo, which is pornography, that and other factors that make learners not be allowed with phones as parents.
One, thank the speaker for that speech. Now call upon the second negative to extend the case on the opposition.
Members in the House, I start my speech in 2, 3, 1. Speak your mind and shape your future. Team Affirmative come and tell us that they would allow students to access these gadgets like the mobile phones, the laptops. But for instance, talk about on the girl side. I think that these gadgets should be given because we know that a child is a person below 18 years. So we should give these gadgets to a person who is above 18 years. Talk about on my side of a girl. I am a girl. What do you guess I will use these mobile phones for, right? These mobile phones, girls most especially are going to use for conning men, right? And these gadgets, not teachers should first get the phones from the students when it is class hours and bring it back during research hours. Members in the House, we think Team Negative because we are prioritizing the future of the students. We think these phones, these mobile phones, the laptops should be given in a specific time, for example, doing research. And this even won't help anymore. We should learn how to think critically, and this will improve on our performance. It's more worse, especially in the side of the girls. Allowing a girl below 18 years to use a phone, that's so bad. I think Team Affirmatives are so confused. I'll talk about misuse and constant securities. We already know that today's world, the literacy like, they bring the TikTok, the YouTube. Students, most children even search for what they don't know in need for. But now Team Affirmative come and tell us that this will help to do research. Oh no, that's a lie. We should train ourselves on critical thinking. That's a very great lie. Mental health and social risks. If you make the child to use the focusing on their own brands. For example, I'm a child. I'll not even bother. I'll not even be interested in my books. Whereas I'll just go and have fun being in YouTube, TikTok. Then what's the matter for me to learn again? I would like to rest my case.
Okay, the House won't thank the speaker for that speech. We now invite the third speaker on the opposition to weigh the debate on their side.
Sorry for the team opposition trying to fail tonight's debate because they are coming with a forest of words but a desert of points. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, what does the major clash point in tonight's debate tell me? Finally, the major clashes are allow access or not. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, the team opposition doesn't bring us that counter policy then, but they just came telling problems such as mental health and social risk. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, how do we see it as timetables? Personally, we said we are going to restrict them. That means they shall not have full access at all times. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, why are they coming out that they shall lead to mental health and social risk? Finally, ladies and gentlemen, and they come with examples such as what we use mobile phones for, by emphasizing that from that girl's side that they will use it for calling. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, this depends on your mindset. If I have a mindset that I will not call, what will lead me to it? Finally, ladies and gentlemen, that's speak from a close view point. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, and they say that they are going to emphasize on critical thinking. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, that's the reason why we see that the new curriculum incorporated the act of revolving phones at school. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, because we see that in this critical thinking, they're going to emphasize more on things that are going to be researchable. That's why we say that it's going to emphasize on research on our alternative. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, how does they tell us? How does their points really tackle the real world problems or the status quo problems? Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we told them clearly that status quo problems are pornography. How is this mental health and social risks associated with it? Finally, ladies and gentlemen, they are not trying to solve in what the status quo is demanding, because you have told them that even though the students are going to have full access to gadgets at school, finally, ladies and gentlemen, we brought to them clearly that we shall put restrictions in their guide. These restrictions we are putting, there shall be time bonds for a particular thing. Not that at all times the person is going to maybe do some things. And at all times doesn't mean you should not follow the school rules. At all times, as we have said, we are going to put restrictions. So that means anytime that you are free out of your lesson schedule, you are going to use these phones. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, what does they tell them? Tell us, finally, ladies and gentlemen, they say that it's going to cause disruption. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, where is this disruption going to be caused? Whereby we see that it is already timetabled. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we see that there is no disruption as of the motion is telling us. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, and we see clearly that they did not give us that counter policy. They did not give us clearly the problem that's solving in the status quo. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we stand a chance of winning tonight's debate simply because you have told them clearly that access to gadgets at school. We said that they are going to be research at school. That is our point. And we told them clearly that even though as much as they shall be having gadgets, we told them that they are going to be timetable, like we shall put restrictions in which they did not have it clearly. And I want them to emphasize more on it because we told them there are going to be restrictions. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to rest my case. Thank you.
The House won't thank the Speaker for that speech. We now call upon the last speaker from the opposition to weigh and end this debate.
I start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I think the team affirmative don't know what we are talking about here. I would wish you first read the motion twice, then you try to understand. We as the negative side, the negative to tell you that we are limiting the amount of time the children need to be having the phones. Like for example, in this motion, we are going to use the teachers for what? For limiting the time the students need for using the phones. For example, like you give a child a phone, after now the class hours for the child to do what? Research. Because in this new curriculum, you find that a teacher just teaches the child and gives activity and sends the child to go and do research. So we shall give the students the phone during research time, not at all time, not even when the child is supposed to think deeply. That is not the time you're supposed to give the child the phone. And we as team affirmative, we came and told you that if we give these students most of the time using the phone or all the time using the phone, it will lead to mental health and social risk. Okay, in this social mental health will be got like when a child is always using a what? This mental health and social risk. For example, as my second speaker stated, she said that in this, when you give a girl child a phone to always be using, you find that a girl child is always engaging in the negative things that happen in the environment. But in this, we are trying to even look for a way of limiting the information that the child has. If it is time for education, the child must go and get the phone for doing research. But in this, as my speaker stated, that the child will be only having access to doing what? That the girl child should not use the phone for all the time. It means that we want to protect the girl child, because the moment they be using the phone all the time, you find that they will not focus in class simply because they want to go to or Facebook to chat with other people. So, in this debate, I would first of all like to tell you the points which were mentioned by my speakers and why they win this debate. They gave us a true point that mental health and social risk, and they explained it better than better than the affirmative side did, because they came here and got confused. And the affirmative side, let me assure you, here we are talking about exposing children to the gadgets every time. But for you are coming here and telling us that we are talking about not exposing the children to what? Gadgets. But here I need you to understand this motion very well. Gave us everything that we needed.
All right. We want to thank the speakers for that speech. Please, let's Peter give them a round of applause. Please shake hands and resume your seats for feedback. Okay, welcome back from that round. Just gonna give feedback, pretty short, so we move to the next round. Feedback, twofold, general comments, and then the call, justification why you have the call that way. So generally in terms of the call, I just think that the speakers are pretty a bit very assertive. We have to do in terms of uniquely explaining things are true in the sense that we say they are true, but secondly, how the things then turn out a little bit very valuable at the end of the day. For example, if we have a problem happening, for example, maybe research within academics, why is that academic research very important? More far so to say that it enables and helps these kids. Because this is now why I would uniquely value creating the full access, because you're able to in turn tell me the value that comes with that research and why it becomes important. Maybe you're telling me it's about academic excellence, this is important in terms of like the job market. Without it, that means that because of the knowledge and span that you get. So uniquely explaining the value of the technology largely happens within like community settings. That is to say, you have it happening within homes and all that. The problem then they had with home settings was to say that this specific research can be problematic in two ways. One, sometimes you don't have guardians to all the time be there for you anyways and enable this research. But secondly, you most likely have no control. That means if this research uniquely happens within home settings, I just generally think that there would be definitely misuse of this gadget, which becomes problematic. They then suggested that to that extent, you must give the kids the ability to access gadgets while in schools, because now that means they don't have an incentive to use the gadgets outside. Why they say that's partially true was to say that I think there is a transition towards things like new curriculum education systems that have to be in schools. First, because if you don't provide the gadgets in school, they have an alternative to make this research out of the normal school hours, which means you open them up to more harmful use of tech in itself. They say two things then in terms of the model. They say on our side of the house, you could still have these being full access, but at least on our side, if it's within school spaces, it's easier to monitor and supervise, because now kids have to be accountable for those actions ultimately while using the gadgets at the end of the day anyways. But the value on their side also say that when it's done within schools, I think you can't scale up the impact within education because of that cross exchange of information between learners from one institution over the other. What's then the chart on opposition? Opposition says that there is going to be unrestricted access within schools, which is most likely going to lead to, say, for instance, distraction anyways. Just on that stance, I feel like this was preemptively taken out by side government. When they tell you about why regulation is possible, government side is not to say that phones are going to be used and kids won't be learning. They said within the breaks we allow them to have their phones, so they essentially use these gadgets within a controlled space. That was the kind of full access they were largely talking about. But in as much as that is the conversation, I don't think opposition is able to nuance and explain logically why the arguments you had were things that mattered for this specific debate. Your argument here was to say we have mental disabilities anyways because there's a unique focus on the phone. I'm asking myself as a judge, why should we care about mental disabilities? Why are they important? As you'll have the ability to grow, you say that I was waiting for the logical conclusion of this example. For example, you might have said that maybe if calculators are being used, we think this also can enhance the ability of people to learn through, say, for instance, using their brains, blah, blah, blah. You're using the example to illustrate why there's an ability for you to critically think in as much as you're not directly using a phone as a whole. You give me the example, you don't impact and explain to me how that runs into the spirit of the entire chart. The other conversation you had there was to say phones are going to be used for eros and romantic relationships anyways. I don't know why this was true at the surface level of the debate in itself. But I mean, the couple of things I would just generally think about why this could be untrue. Because if you're accessing internet anyways, I mean, we've all been in society, like averagely speaking, and you only have access either to Zoom and all that. I mean, we can uninstall WhatsApp applications anyways, or I mean, we can buy bundles that largely restrict access to, for instance, class platforms over other specific platforms. I mean, that doesn't come within the debate. But I wasn't willing to buy into this analysis in as much as you are unable to explain to me how this happens or why truly this happens on your side at the end of the day. given the fact that there's a clear explanation on how you can have some level of control, and most especially that kids are going to be accountable because their actions are being the assertion that these kids are much more likely going to engage in eros relationship as opposed to academic chat and all that kind of thing. I think you talk about the time frame, blah blah blah. There's a lot of stuff already said on this side around how this can be timetabled and all that. Uniquely, why I felt they were like ranking above you was the unique explanation of how this framing, i.e. within school setting and its relationship to the new curriculum, requires research in itself. You talk about the impact, why now there's going to be, say for instance, increased research for these new scholars. Most of these things were cut out on opposition and explain to me the value in itself and why this is necessary for us to do at this specific point in itself. I think OP just like tries to do little in terms of explanation, how on their side they can still be able to scale up the impact in terms of research within these specific education institutions without exactly having an access to gadgets within that specific regard on that end in itself. For example, maybe libraries exist, there is like still reading material for these kids, they can still broaden in itself, like there's career guidance in itself, like researchers, counselors, all these guys can amount to the knowledge scope that you get within schools. Most of the things would be like potentially good things to explain why phones don't have to be in schools. I think you do little in terms of that explanation. That's why we had proposition team working above opposition. Are there any questions in regards to the call? None. Good luck.